The city of Coruscant was covered by the incessant noise of ships crossing the sky, reflecting the weight of the war that consumed the galaxy. Inside the Jedi Temple, the council met in long sessions, but every word seemed to be carried by a shadow. The Force, once clear as water, now seemed cloudy, hiding the future from the Masters. The Senate was increasingly held hostage by the Chancellor's words, and the Jedi, torn between their spiritual duty and the politics of the Republic, felt the balance slipping through their fingers. Mace Windu leaned back in his chair, looking at Yoda with an almost suffocating gravity. The Chancellor's power grows each day. If we do not act, the Council will be nothing more than an ornament of the Republic. Yoda, however, replied in a calm voice, though marked by unease. Wise we must be, not rash. Clouds in the Force I see. Darkness growing. The room fell silent, as both masters recognized the truth in what the other said, even if they disagreed on how to deal with it. As the tension hung in the air, Obi-Wan walked through the doors, coming straight from the front lines. His face bore the weariness of months of battle and the mark of the responsibility of maintaining peace in a time of war. He bowed briefly before announcing, "The worlds are weary, masters. Many no longer trust the Senate and see Palpatine as the only one capable of leading. Loyalty to the Chancellor is growing faster than hope." The words fell like stones on the council, reminding everyone of how the galaxy was changing before their eyes. In the middle of the meeting, Anakin was summoned. The young man walked to the center of the hall, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. His eyes carried concern for Padme, and his impatience was evident in every gesture. "Masters, I don't understand why we just keep watching. Palpatine brought stability when no one else could. He is not an enemy, he is an ally." His words echoed through the room, creating discomfort among those present. Obi-Wan stared at him firmly, trying to silence him with his gaze. Yoda, sitting silently, seemed to hear distant voices in the Force, as if something was trying to reveal itself behind the veil of shadows. The balance was no longer just threatened, it was crumbling before them, and every wrong word could mean the fall of the Order. It was in this scene of confusion and exhaustion that something extraordinary happened. The air in the center of the council seemed to bow, as if an invisible presence had crossed the walls of time. A bluish glow took shape before everyone, causing the masters to rise in alertness. It was a figure that many there knew, but never expected to see again. Qui-Gon Jinn, now as a specter of the Force, appeared before the Jedi, bringing with him a heavy silence that engulfed the entire room. Obi-Wan put his hand to his mouth in disbelief. "Master?" His eyes sparkled, remembering the man who had shaped his life. Anakin, on the other hand, felt a chill run through his body. Before his eyes was the man who had found him on Tatooine, who had believed in his destiny when no one else dared to. He was the master who had stated with conviction that he was the chosen one, even though Anakin was just a boy. Now, seeing him again, even as a spirit, aroused in him a mixture of reverence and confusion. Anakin's heart raced, as if that ancient presence rekindled memories he was trying to recall. Windu clenched his fists, not out of fear, but out of alertness, for he knew that this apparition was not ordinary. Qui-Gon did not speak immediately. His gaze swept across the hall, resting for a moment on each master. Plo Koon stood up, trying to contain his emotion. Is this an echo of the Force, or something else? Yoda simply closed his eyes, sensing that this manifestation was neither an illusion nor a Sith trick. The living Force had torn the veil to allow a master to return. The feeling they all shared was that a greater truth was about to be revealed. The ghost finally opened his mouth. His voice echoed as if coming from another world, but it was firm and clear. "This temple will soon fall, not by outside hands, but from within. The shadow need not cross its walls, for it is already in your hearts." Each word sounded like a blow, cutting through the master's certainties. The silence that followed was even heavier than the revelation itself, for everyone understood that this message was not a mere warning, but a sentence. Anakin took a step forward, his breathing quickening. "What does this mean? How can it fall?" Who would destroy us? But Qui-Gon did not answer. His gaze fixed on the young man for a few moments, laden with something Anakin couldn't decipher. Warning, hope, or regret. The Spectre then turned to Yoda and added, "Listen to the Force. Not the Senate. Not the war. Only the Force will show you the way." And then, his figure began to fade away. Obi-Wan took an instinctive step forward, reaching out his hand. "Master, don't leave us without answers." But it was too late. The blue glow fragmented into particles that dissipated into the air. The hall was plunged into a deathly silence, each master reflecting on what they had just witnessed. Qui-Gon had brought no explanations, only a warning that could change the fate of the Order, or seal it forever. The Council was no longer the same after that apparition. The Force had spoken clearly and unmistakably, but the weight of the message was open to interpretation. For some, it was a warning that Anakin held the future of the Order in his hands. For others, it was a harbinger of betrayal coming from within the Senate itself. But they all knew one thing. The war was no longer just in space and on the battlefields. The real fight was beginning within them. The silence that followed the ghost's departure seemed to crush the hearts of every master present. Mace Windu was the first to speak, slamming his hand on the council chair. "This cannot be ignored. If the temple falls, it will be because of someone from within. A traitor hidden among us." His words fell like blades, further dividing the tension. Some masters nodded, while others were uncomfortable with the idea of accusing their own order without proof. Yoda, sitting silently, remained motionless for a few moments, as if diving even deeper into the flow of the Force. His half-closed eyes opened slowly, and his voice sounded grave. "Lie, it was not. Vision Qui-Gon brought. Confirm, the Force did." These words further increased the unease in the room. If Yoda, the wisest among them, admitted the truth of the warning, then to ignore it would be foolish. But the message was enigmatic, and each master sought to interpret it in his own way. Anakin was disturbed, unable to contain his agitation. He walked to the center of the hall and said, his voice thick with emotion, "He looked at me. It was as if he was speaking directly to me. This warning is about me, isn't it? All of this revolves around my choice." Obi-Wan rose immediately, trying to calm the apprentice. "Don't jump to conclusions, Anakin. What Qui-Gon said could mean many things. Don't make every word of the Force a burden on your shoulders." But the young Jedi was no longer listening, lost in his own thoughts. The discussions became heated. Plo Koon stood up, his words firm. "We must not get caught up in personal interpretations. What we heard was a warning about the fall of the Order, not a prophecy about a single Jedi. There's no denying that Anakin is central to everything that has happened. Perhaps Qui-Gon has returned just to remind us of the Chosen One." The council was fragmented by the different interpretations. Mace Windu would not back down from his position. A warning like this cannot be seen as a metaphor. If the temple falls, it will be because we have been betrayed. We must consider the possibility that someone among us is already corrupt. His eyes swept across the room, and for a moment, the atmosphere became stifling. Obi-Wan raised his voice in protest. "Are you suggesting that we should distrust each other? That is not the way of the Force, Mace. It would only weaken us." The argument grew, and the ghost of Qui-Gon seemed to have lit a fire that no one knew how to extinguish. Obi-Wan couldn't hide his concern. For him, there was a direct connection between the message and Anakin. Qui-Gon believed in him from the beginning. Perhaps he was saying that Anakin needs to be guided now more than ever. If we fall into mistrust, we will lose the meaning of what he always taught us. Obi-Wan's words were met with mixed reactions. For some, they were a sensible appeal. For others, it seemed like just an attempt to protect his apprentice. It was at that moment that Bail Organa was welcomed into the temple. He brought news that the Senate was increasingly dominated by Palpatine, who was concentrating unprecedented powers in his hands. "Jedi Masters, the time for neutrality is over. If you do not act now, there will be no Republic left to defend. The people only see the Chancellor, not the Order." His words added even more weight to the situation, as the echo of Qui-Gon's warning seemed to align with the political tensions. Windu stared at Bail firmly. What if the fall he spoke of is exactly that? The Temple's submission to Palpatine's will? We cannot allow the Order to become hostage to the Senate. Bail, however, replied with conviction. Then act before it's too late. Palpatine has already become indispensable to the worlds of the Republic. If you wait, public opinion will definitely be against you. The conflict between spiritual duty and political reality was becoming impossible to ignore. Anakin remained silent after listening to Bail, but his mind was racing. If the Senate was increasingly in Palpatine's hands, then perhaps the Chancellor was truly the only one capable of saving Padme and ensuring peace. Qui-Gon's warning, however, gnawed at him, as if every word had been written for him. For the young man, there was no doubt. His choice was at the center of everything. But that conviction pushed him further into the abyss of doubt. Yoda, tired of listening to the growing disorder, raised his staff and said, "Split we must not. Divide us, the dark side wishes. Unity we must maintain. Hear the Force, yes. Political wars, no." Even so, his words were not enough to restore serenity. The specter of Qui-Gon had planted the seed of discord, and each interpretation only reinforced the idea that the fall was already underway. Obi-Wan glanced discreetly at Anakin, seeing the shadow of doubt grow in him. He knew his apprentice was vulnerable, and he feared that the old master's warning would only add to the burden on his heart. Meanwhile, Windu approached Yoda and said quietly, "We must prepare for the worst. The ghost would not have come if it were not urgent." Yoda nodded silently, but the concern in his eyes was evident. The council, once united, was now divided by interpretations, suspicions, and fears. The ghost of Qui-Gon had appeared for only a moment, but his brief message reverberated like thunder in the heart of every Jedi. There was no agreement, no clarity, only the certainty that the Force had warned them, and that any choice from that point on could seal the fate of the Order. The revelation of Qui-Gon's ghost remained like a shadow among the Masters. Gradually, they began to understand that the message did not concern the Temple as a building, but the very essence of the Order. The warning spoke of inner decay, of divided hearts, of choices that could corrode what the Jedi had protected for millennia. It was not the walls of Coruscant that were at risk, but the unity of the Council and the survival of its ideals. Yoda closed his eyes and searched his memories for Qui-Gon's ancient words about the living Force. He remembered how the Master had warned that balance was not achieved only through rules and dogma, but through a direct connection with the energy that flowed within each being. As he recalled this, he realized how far the Council had strayed from this principle, sinking into formalities and dependence on the Senate. When he opened his eyes, he said in a firm voice, "Blind we have been. Lost. The warning should not be." Mace Windu, restless, paced the hall with slow steps. If the warning speaks of our own downfall, we must admit that the enemy is not only external. The Senate, the war, all of these are tools. But there is something deeper. Perhaps we are already entangled in a web that we cannot see. His words found an echo in the others, for each felt that the ghost had pointed to an invisible but present threat. Yoda plunged into meditation, in absolute silence. The Force led him through visions of darkness, thrones in flames, rays of energy consuming masters, and above all, the figure of the Chancellor hovering like a shadow that blended with that of the Sith himself. When they returned to the Council, Anakin was in the Chancellor's room. Yoda spoke with the solemnity of one carrying a heavy burden. Connection to the Sith, perhaps the Chancellor has. Clearer, with each passing moment, it becomes. The words fell like thunder in the room. Obi-Wan rose quickly, his face heavy with concern. "If this is so, we have no time. But what worries me most is Anakin. He is too close to the Chancellor, and this bond could be used against him." The Council turned their eyes to the young master, and it was Yoda who replied, "Watch the boy you must. Guide him more than ever you will need. Decisive, his choice will be." Obi-Wan took a deep breath and nodded, knowing that the task was more than an order. It was a personal burden. He had known Anakin since he was a boy and knew his virtues, but also his weaknesses. It would be painful to watch over someone he considered a brother, but if the future of the Order really depended on his choices, there was no other way. The weight of the mission fell on his shoulders, and he did not shy away. Meanwhile, Windu remained expressionless, as if he were already planning direct action against Palpatine. We cannot remain in discussion alone. If there is a connection to the Sith, we must confirm it and act. Time is against us. Plo Koon nodded silently, but his posture made it clear that he agreed. The council was beginning to divide not only in its interpretation, but in the urgency to act. Anakin, absent from the meeting, was still unaware of the conclusions that were being formed, but everyone knew that his presence at the center of this game was inevitable. Obi-Wan felt the weight of this truth and understood that any false move could push the young man definitively into darkness. The mission was not just to watch. It was to understand, guide, and, if necessary, prevent the Chosen One from becoming the enemy's weapon. Yoda looked up at the council's stained glass window, observing the city that stretched as far as the eye could see. Shadow grows. Our choices now will decide tomorrow. The phrase echoed in everyone's mind. What Qui-Gon had left behind was not an explanation, but an invitation to look beyond appearances. The fall of the Order would not come with explosions or invasions, but with blindness to the truth that lay hidden in plain sight. Obi-Wan stood up, his expression determined. I will accept the mission. I will not leave Anakin alone at this time. If there is risk, I will be there to guide him. His words brought relief to some, but also aroused fears in other masters, who doubted Obi-Wan's ability to be impartial given his bond with the apprentice. Even so, the council approved, knowing that he was the only one in a position to be close to the young man. The future remained uncertain, like a stormy sea about to swallow fragile ships. But one thing was clear to everyone. Qui-Gon's appearance had forever changed the fate of the Order. None of those present would leave that room the same, and every decision from then on would be marked by the memory of the Master who had dared to return from the dead just to deliver one last warning. The echo of the living force now accompanied them, and they could not escape it. The council discussed in hushed voices who should be sent against General Grievous. Mace Windu advocated caution, while Plo Koon suggested that only an experienced master should take on the task. It was then that Anakin stepped forward, interrupting the exchange of opinions. Let me go. If I defeat Grievous, the war will end, and Palpatine will have to return his powers. This is the opportunity we need. Mace Windu was the first to break the silence. This mission is dangerous, Skywalker. Grievous is no ordinary opponent. His cunning and coldness make him more lethal than many we have faced. He leaned back in his chair, watching Anakin suspiciously. But before the answer came, Obi-Wan raised his voice. Then let me go with him. Together, we will have a better chance. I know Grievous, and Anakin has already faced his generals. Together, we can bring victory. Yoda rested his chin on his staff, reflecting silently for a few moments. Alone, Anakin must not go. Together, they may succeed. A great test this battle will be. Plo Koon nodded silently, and soon other masters also expressed their agreement. It was the first time in a long time that the council seemed to unite around a decision. The pair of masters and apprentice would be sent to end Grievous' terror. Anakin took a deep breath, feeling a wave of confidence rise within him. For the first time in weeks, he saw the council recognize his ability without reservation. He looked at Obi-Wan and a brief smile escaped him. We will not fail, the young man assured him. Obi-Wan, however, remained serious. The flames of war burned more intensely, and they both knew it. The next day, the ships crossed the skies of Utapau. The landing was quick, and the roar of the engines echoed through the planet's caves. Clone troops cleared the way, but soon fell behind as the two Jedi headed toward the general's hideout. Obi-Wan walked with his saber in hand, alert to every sound. Anakin, on the other hand, remained impatient, as if the Force itself were pushing him forward. When they found Grievous, the general raised his 4 lightsabers, spinning them with superhuman speed. His metallic voice resounded, "Two Jedi against me? It won't be enough." The clash was fierce from the very first moment. Obi-Wan remained calm, blocking the side blows, while Anakin advanced aggressively, forcing the cyborg to retreat. The room was filled with sparks and the hum of blades. Grievous attacked furiously, but the coordination between the two Jedi became insurmountable. Obi-Wan focused on containing and tiring the enemy, while Anakin took advantage of every opening to strike. Gradually, the general lost ground, until a precise sequence forced his defenses to cross. With a quick movement, Obi-Wan cut off two of his arms, and Anakin then launched a blow that pierced the armor. Grievous fell, defeated by the combination of master and apprentice. The victory brought momentary relief. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan, breathing heavily. It's done. One more step toward ending the war. Obi-Wan, however, did not share the same confidence. He put away his lightsaber and replied, "Not yet. There is something greater than Grievous at stake. The real enemy is not on the battlefields." The words were harsh, but true. Anakin looked away, for in his heart the memory of Qui-Gon's warning still burned. Back on Coruscant, news of Grievous' death reached the council. Mace Windu and Yoda, who had remained on Coruscant, met privately, away from the other masters. The former spoke in a grave voice. "Now there are no more excuses for the Chancellor to retain his powers. If he does not return them, we will have proof that something is very wrong." Yoda slowly agreed. "Yes, time has come. Confront Palpatine, we must." The decision was made in silence, but its weight spread like fire through the corridors of the temple. The ghost of Qui-Gon had warned that the fall would not come from outside, but from within. And now, each step confirmed that the center of darkness was not far away, but sat on the throne of the Senate. Obi-Wan and Anakin had won on Utapau, but on Coruscant, Windu and Yoda were preparing to face the real enemy. The Senate was plunged into silence when Yoda and Mace Windu entered the Chancellor's office. Palpatine awaited them with a cold smile, as if he had already foreseen their arrival. "Have you come to arrest me? Or do you finally confess that the Jedi want to seize power?" Mace did not respond with words, but simply ignited his purple lightsaber, and Yoda did the same with his green one. "The end has come. Your mask has fallen." The air vibrated as Palpatine revealed his red lightsaber and charged at them. The confrontation was devastating. Force lightning lit up the hall, Senate chairs flew into pieces, and the sound of blades filled every corner of the room. Palpatine fought with the fury of a cornered animal, but Yoda and Windu moved in sync, complementing each other like two sides of the same scale. The duel dragged on, destroying columns and corroding the floor with the energy that dissipated with each clash. Palpatine tried to break through Yoda's defense with his lightning bolts, but Windu took advantage of the opening and advanced, cutting the red saber in two. The Sith roared, throwing all his energy at them, but the force was no longer in his favor. With a precise blow, Windu pierced the Chancellor's chest, ending Darth Sidious's reign once and for all. The body of the man who had dominated the Senate fell ingloriously, and the room fell silent. It was at that moment that Anakin entered, panting, his eyes wide. When he saw Palpatine fallen, despair took hold of him. "No! He was the only one who could help me save Padme." His voice echoed, a mixture of pain and fury. Obi-Wan, who had followed him, grabbed his arm and spoke firmly. "Anakin, look at me. What are you talking about? He was a lie. He used your fear to trap you. You haven't lost anything. You've freed yourself." Anakin fell to his knees, feeling a whirlwind inside him. Obi-Wan's words were like chains breaking. Slowly, his breathing calmed, and tears came when he thought of Padme. Obi-Wan lifted him by the shoulders. "You are not alone, my friend." Weeks later, a child's cry broke the silence on Naboo. Anakin was by Padme's side when Luke was born, and soon after, Leia. Padme smiled with tears in her eyes, hugging the twins. "We are together, Anakin. We are alive." He held his wife's hands, feeling that the weight of destiny had changed. The prophecy had not been fulfilled by destruction, but by the choice to remain. Anakin made a decision that surprised everyone. I will leave the Order. I cannot be a Jedi Master and a father at the same time. My duty now is to Padme, Luke, and Leia. That is the choice I make. There was no resistance, as marriage was not allowed. Obi-Wan remained silent, but deep down he understood his friend's choice. On Naboo, life took on a different rhythm. Padme took care of the children, and Anakin became the guardian of the family, living far from the wars and intrigues of Coruscant. However, he did not abandon the Force. In secret, he began to train Luke, teaching him discipline, control, and the meaning of true connection with the living Force, as Qui-Gon had preached. The boy grew strong, attentive to his father's lessons. Leia, although younger, also showed signs of the Force. Padme said that her daughter had inherited the determination and brave heart of the family. Anakin smiled when he saw this, feeling that the Force manifested itself differently in the twins. In Luke, power and skill. In Leia, intuition and precocious wisdom. The Skywalker family was, in itself, a promise of the future for the Jedi. Over time, Anakin secretly reconnected with some of the Masters. Obi-Wan would visit them on Naboo, bringing news from the Council and seeking advice from his friend. Together, they discussed ways to rebuild the Order without repeating the mistakes of the past. Luke, increasingly skilled, accompanied his father on exercises and discreet missions. Gradually, the young man became not only Anakin's apprentice, but also a bridge between the new generation and the surviving Jedi. Thus, destiny was rewritten. The fall of the Order had been foretold, but Qui-Gon's warning had served as a beacon to prevent the worst. Palpatine had not lived to sow his empire, and Anakin had not become a slave to darkness. On Naboo, among fields and lakes, the Skywalker family grew close, while young Luke, guided by his father, prepared to carry on the Jedi legacy. And in everyone's hearts remained the certainty that the Force had offered a second chance.